The UK's top AUKUS envoy to Australia is praising the trilateral pact as a win-win for global defence. The visit comes amidst growing pressure for Australia to ramp up investment in the naval infrastructure, with nuclear-powered submarines at the heart of the alliance, a critical moment for the Australia-US partnership as well, and AUKUS is front and centre of that. For more, we're joined by Professor Tim Harcourt from UTS, also the Airport Economist channel here on Ticker. Thanks so much for your time. Professor Harcourt, talk to us about AUKUS, how it's actually strengthening the military ties between Australia and the US. And right now, does the US view it as important as Australia does?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and the intervention or the visit by Sir Stephen Lovegrove is actually very timely, because most of the discussion in Australia is just about how America sees AUKUS and how Australia sees AUKUS, but we haven't heard a lot from the UK. And as Sir Stephen said, they've reviewed the AUKUS agreement, and they think there's great value for the UK, the US, and indeed Australia. And they see Australia, particularly the submarine maintenance facilities in Western Australia, as being completely crucial to the US's strategic interests in the Indo-Pacific, and indeed of all the AUKUS partners.
Here's the issue. Australia's submarines, the Collins-class submarines, keep having their life cycle expanded. They were from the 1990s, obviously, and they keep making them, trying to keep them operational. Australia needs new submarines. We tried the French, then decided that was too expensive, so went for an even more expensive option in the hope that we could get nuclear submarines through AUKUS. Since that was announced, though, between Rishi Sunak, between Scott Morrison and Joe Biden, there's a new president in town, and the world has changed, and both the UK and the US are talking about an increased investment in their own submarine fleet at a time where the Virginia-class submarines are taking longer and longer to build for the US alone. Will Australia ever get these subs?
Yeah, well, the interesting that Sir Stephen Lovegrove was saying that actually the investment by Australia, particularly in Western Australia, to some extent South Australia, is actually making it easier for the US with respect to the Virginia's class subs. And in some ways, Aaron, I think there's an industry policy question, and then there's a strategic question. I think a lot of the motivation from the new Trump administration has been about America first, made in America. We want to produce as much as we can, everything from submarines to pharmaceuticals to everything else, EVs within the US, and that's driving a lot of their motivation. Whilst Sir Stephen Lovegrove and other analysts would see it more as a geopolitical strategic lens and what provides the best protection for our nations, for the alliance, and indeed for most of the partners in the Indo-Pacific, and obviously the Philippines and Vietnam and India. The ASEAN countries having the same discussions in their defence circles and trade circles as we speak.
It's interesting that book 1984 referred to the UK as Airstrip 1 for the United States. Does Australia become Substrip 1 for the US and the UK Navy here, where because we are so far away from both of those places, but prime location in the Pacific, do we become a hub base?
Yeah, George Orwell got a lot of things right, didn't he? Particularly in terms of newspeak and the use of language in politics, and the rise of political correctness. But certainly, I think Australia's strategic location is obviously crucial to the UK and the US, and indeed, it's very important for our other allies in the Indo-Pacific. I mean, the Philippines and Vietnam and the ASEAN nations. India regards Australia's location as very important for what they're trying to achieve, and indeed our Pacific neighbours to the east also regard that as extremely important. I think in some ways, Aaron, the worlds of trade and industry policy and economics are now starting to mesh together with defence and strategy. Often economists just look at reducing tariffs and trying to produce as much globally as cheaply as we can, but when it starts to mesh with geopolitics and strategic issues, we saw through COVID that was a lot more important than just getting things at the cheapest price. So I think that's where a lot of this direction is, particularly given the Trump administration is running a very nativist America first policy, not quite isolationism, but certainly remaking the world. And that's, I mean, one good thing about that, it's forcing Britain and the Europeans and other nations to start to boost their own defence and their own investment in defence industry.
I guess the challenge is, though, is the US is sending mixed signals about AUKUS. One minute they really want it, it's really important. The next it's up for review. And for Australia, it is really our sole military policy. It's to get these submarines built, nuclear submarines. Will they be built by the Americans or by the British, do you think?
Or a combination. I think the interesting thing about Sir Stephen Lovegrove is he's saying that we're getting mixed signals from the administration, but the US Navy is rock solid with Australia and the UK. And I guess, Aaron, it's interesting, having worked in, Austrade and DFAT myself, whatever happens with politics and who wins elections, the administration's officials in defence and security and DFAT and in trade, they have long-standing relationships, no matter who is president or prime minister, and so that's quite interesting.
You've been watching Yes Minister, where it's let's just wait for
even
this
the
one to
reruns,
go, and the next one will come along with a different policy. But we're always here. Always appreciate your insights. We'll call you Sir Humphrey. Thank you so much, Tim Harcourt.
I couldn't possibly comment.